Today on Isolation Nation, I said these words, let's get naked. And people said on our team, what? They looked at me kind of creepy. And I said, I really want to get naked. And they looked at me even creepier. Then I realized what they were thinking. And I said, no, you creeps. I'm not talking about actually getting naked. I'm talking about getting Biff naked. Musician, author, actor, and inspirational speaker. That's the Biff naked I'm talking about. Hey, Biff.
Hello.
Well, that was a little bit creepy. She is hysterically funny, and she uses humor to offset some of the real struggles in her life, like cancer.
Good-looking corpse. That was always what we thought. Good-looking corpse.
Then, like kidney failure.
The best day of my life was when my kidney was failing.
Then, heart disease and heart surgery.
And as he worked on my heart, my whole heartbeat was rewritten. And I went, and I started breathing. And I thought, oh my God, if I live through this, God, I'm going to clean my car.
Amazing. She has a spirit that just won't be crushed. And there's one other thing I love about Biff.
People say, you look like a teenager. And I say, yes, because I still dress like one. That's the key.
Huh? I finally found my kindred spirit, somebody who dresses inappropriately for their age. But you and I, Biff, are redefining what's appropriate for age, I like to think. How are you?
I'm awesome. How are you?
You know, I had such a great time today going and researching some stuff you've done, including that speech, which was, I don't even know what year it was, but I honestly laughed out loud. You know how you always like LOL and you're not really laughing out loud? I did. Oh my God, the story about you and the handsome doctor and
That's
him.
right.
You know, I sort of weighed my options on that one, whether to use it or not. So you have been through a lot, but you would not change anything. Am I correct?
Not a thing. Absolutely not. I would do it again. I would do it all again.
But even when you got your breast cancer diagnosis, you must have been concerned that you wouldn't recover, that you wouldn't go in remission, and that you would die. I mean, that's the natural reaction when you hear cancer, right?
Not me. No way. I was so overworked and completely stressed out. I thought, thank goodness it's not my mother. Thank goodness it's not my sister. Thank goodness it's me. You know, I didn't have kids. I was a newlywed. I'd seen
You're always a newlywed, aren't you?
Always. Always. I love it. I love weddings, especially my own.
How many?
Only 3.
Only 3, but you must have been
weddings.
You must have been proposed to more than 3 times.
Well, and I was, I'm the girl that was raised by a Minnesota mother, so I could never say no. And yes, I was engaged just over a dozen times, I suppose.
Oh, come on. Really?
Well, what are you supposed to say? What can you say? You can't say no. I mean, and dash someone's hopes. I mean, hopefully if someone is asking you to get married, then you know them well enough to be in love and everything. So how would you want to possibly hurt that person? You love them.
What a funny person that you are. And I met you, I guess, I on Off the Record years ago.
Yes.
And this was well before you had breast cancer, well before you had kidney failure, well before you had a hole in your heart that had to be fixed. What the person that I met back then in 1998, maybe I don't remember what it was, but somewhere around there. How is that person different than the person today? Because I mean, we never had a conversation in depth like we're having right now. So was that person there in 1998?
I think so. I think that a lot of, I was very intense. I was working very, very hard. We did about, I'm going to guess, around 275 to 300 shows a year for almost 12 to 13 years before I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Breast cancer was the first vacation I'd ever had from my job, ever. And I was so relieved that it made me really examine what my work was actually doing to me.
So 12 to 13 years, you were doing 300 shows a year, say? I mean, that seems like an extraordinarily large amount of time that you would have been on the road, that you would have been performing. I would imagine you didn't really have time in your life for anything but that and getting engaged.
Well, yeah. And also you can look at, me being, kind of isolated, and it's a bit, it's alienating having a job where you're the only female in this touring tour bus. That's almost like a jail in many ways, because you develop your own society with your own rules. And yeah, I was isolated, and I think that I overcompensated in a lot of my relationships because I was always away and always working.
So let's apply what you've learned to mental health. And first of all, have you personally struggled with something above and beyond the normal, ups and downs of life? Ups and downs of life are not mental illness. Mental illness is when you're down and you're not getting up, and you can't get up until you go and find a way to do so.
Well, I think that, in a clinical definition, I can probably say for sure, I had to stop all drugs and alcohol when I was about 24. I think I was about 24 years old, because I could not do my job if I had even a teaspoon of beer. I just, too chatty, and I would wake up in Italy or married or in jail. So I didn't drink alcohol almost the entirety of my career, but instead, those anxieties that I did have, I coped. My addictive personality did definitely come out, probably in some disordered eating. I didn't eat anything. If I was stressed out, I would just fast. That was always my way of doing things. And, I became really underweight. And what a lot of people don't understand is when you do that to your body, you're also doing that to your brain. And so I always kind of figure it like my juices weren't working correctly because I was depleting my physiology of a lot of different nutrients, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that everybody does definitely have anxiety. And I think that my anxiety manifested in, these coping techniques that I developed, which were, almost, I guess, unusual optimism. And I use it as a coping technique always, no matter what is happening. It's like that cartoon we like where the room is on fire and the person in the middle is still drinking coffee saying, I'm fine, or saying everything's fine. I don't know. I think that I'm very lucky that I wound up getting through that period of intense work history pretty unscathed in the big picture.
And, one of the things that you've talked about in things that I've read and things that I've seen from you is the lack of mental health services available to people who had a diagnosis like yours. I mean, you were saying that you hung out with 100 or 99 other women who had a similar illness, and you spoke about how you actually had amazing times with these women.
Oh, 100%. And it was quite by accident. I was in a clinical trial, actually. And the truth is, the clinical trial that I was in with 99 other women was supposed to study bone density. And, it's a lot of science speak, but basically it wanted to study women who exercised. It was a randomized trial nationwide in Canada, and study women who exercised during chemotherapy. So we would get in a room together 3 mornings a week, a number of us in the city I was in, which was Vancouver, and we all became best friends. It became a sorority. And I had never had that on a tour bus with all these, sweaty dudes.
Right.
I had never had that. And also because of my job, especially in the 90s and whatnot, it was just a little bit it was a little difficult. It was isolating, and I didn't necessarily make new friends very easily without it kind of being something to do with my work. So it was kind of weird and sometimes insincere. So all of us in the room together, we were all bald. We were all going through our surgeries together. We were all, in a variety of sicknesses from chemotherapy side effects, and we laughed our heads off every time we were together. We laughed and we cried, and it was amazing. That community that we developed very organically really did, inform the rest of my life going forward.
I think you know a bit of my history, right? That I've suffered from or battled. I don't like the word "suffered from" because obviously it's true. You suffer, but I don't think
Yes.
that really does it justice. So I battled depression, and it's been severe at times. So severe that I felt like my life was over. I didn't want to end my life, but I sure as hell didn't want to keep living the way I felt. So, I see you as this incredibly positive person. If I would have called you and said, Biff, I'm really struggling, I probably would have in that context called you Beth, right? Your given name. If we're talking about, sort of how I can change my life, what would you have said? What would you have said? What would you say to someone, given what you've learned, who's suffering from a mental illness, which I've always thought is a physical illness of the brain. We just call it mental illness for some reason.
Yes. Well, of course, I'm not an expert.
Of course.
But I do know for sure that sometimes it's really not helpful for a person to kind of try and infuse your positivity on a person who is going through something emotional, particularly if it's a mental health issue. It's not helpful always. It's not always helpful to be that little ray of sunshine. Sometimes that's not what a person needs. I think that for me anyway, and in my history with some of my own friends that have experienced a variety of different mental illness experiences and mental health experiences, I would basically ask a question: what do you need? What can I do? And I would get in my car and say, we don't even have to talk. I can just drive you to the grocery store, just to lend my physical body to the room, kind of thing. I think it really depends on the person, honestly. And you got to know what someone needs.
What you said about being that ray of sunshine, I could see Chris Denny, who's going to be our next guest, and I could see him nodding his head. It's one of the most intuitive things that I've ever heard from someone who hasn't been in the position that I was in. You've been in lots of other difficult positions, but not specifically severe depression. But what you said is like that is gold, and that should be in the caregiver's Bible, which is, being that ray of sunshine sometimes is pretty damn annoying. And it's not what people need, because if you could just will yourself out based on your surroundings, then you would.
Of course.
So I love that answer. Oh my gosh. You're like, are you the wisest person I know? It's possible.
No, I don't think so. I just think that, again, what we were talking about earlier about just getting older and having life experience, it teaches us that sometimes people don't need us to pat them on the head and say they're there and kind of do the top hat and cane dance. I mean, it's okay in the waiting room for strangers, but when someone is really struggling, to basically be available for whatever it is that person needs is probably more meaningful and more helpful.
Over the course of your life, you mentioned friends that have struggled. What is your experience with mental health? Or I kind of always struggled. Am I talking about mental health, or am I talking about mental illness? If we were just talking about mental health, then why would we need to have this discussion? So your experience in the past with mental illness with people that you cared about.
Well, one thing that's, and mental illness is, I have a friend of mine that has schizophrenia, and she is now a geriatric patient, and her needs have changed so much as a geriatric mental health patient compared to when she was, say, 40 or 30 with her schizophrenia. And so it's really interesting. I'm hugely invested in her health and in her happiness more than anything else, or her well-being and her happiness. And I think that as far as a clinical diagnosis, she's my only close friend that is experiencing and has a chronic experience of always experiencing the ups and downs that come with her body's version of schizophrenia. And it's fascinating and important, I feel, as her friend, and I know that I'm speaking for her family as well, to be absolutely 100% committed to finding out everything they can, to reading and learning everything they can, and to really, letting her know that we are absolutely all in, whatever it looks like, from the fantastic days to the days that are absolutely, the bottom of the pit. And I think that, again, as people go through different experiences as they age, for my friend anyway, as they get older, but also as their economics might change, or their geography changes if they move, or there's just so many variables that come along with being in somebody's life, somebody who does have a mental health issue or a mental illness. But I also think that it's important to acknowledge that people who are not diagnosed doesn't mean that they do not have something that's going on. And I think that a lot of people do not seek professional care young enough in their life, and they might not even know that there is, that they can find out more about what's going on with themselves. And I think it needs to be normalized.
Yeah, what you just said is incredibly true. Although I guess if it's true, it can't be incredibly true. It's just true or false.
Right.
But what you said is something that, I've, before the pandemic, I traveled across the country giving 2 speeches a week.
Wow.
And one of the things that often I realize is that people don't understand that that they're not well, because you've never lived in anybody else's brain, right? So what you have in your brain can just seem like normal. And then when I talk about what depression and anxiety feel like to me when I'm at my worst, people will go, "Oh my gosh, like I thought you were talking about me. I never realized it." So it's, and then there's the whole idea of the stigma, right? Which is people don't want to acknowledge it. I talked to the quarterback of the BC Lions, Mike Riley, a couple of weeks ago on the show. Mike Riley said, "Oh my God, I had these attacks, these pains in my chest." I mean, it ended up being panic attacks, right? Yeah. He said, "I went to the doctor and I thought to myself, God, I hope it's not mental illness, anything but that." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, when he said I had panic attacks, I mean, I would think that would be a great thing to hear, right? He said, "I was devastated because of the stigma around mental illness. I would rather have had heart disease." I mean, it's crazy.
Yes. And also because it's not invisible. And that's the other thing, it's hard for people. If you look well, if you look fine, they can't necessarily see something. So it's almost like it's not believed, and it's hard to feel validated a lot of the time. And people don't know what to say often. And perhaps it's more prevalent with anxiety or depression. I'm not sure, but they say, "Oh, come on," and they really mean well. They mean well, but it's not helpful because it is a bit invisible.
Can you hang on for a little while I introduce Chris, or
Yes.
Are you exceptionally busy writing a new book by hand? Doing all. You're vegan, right?
I have been since for almost 30 years. Yeah.
You know how I knew that?
How?
It says it behind you. There's so much I found out about you just by looking at the wall behind you.
My wall. Well, I never married a vegan.
You never married a vegan.
No, and I've always been one. And I always do all the cooking.
So see if your husband, is he a carnivore? Does he eat meat?
Not at home.
Well, that's because you do the cooking
Not
and
with
you don't
me.
cook. Yeah, right. But
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself that if you're a normal eater, and I'm not saying that you're an abnormal eater, but
I
in
understand.
general, in the 20th and 21st century, the majority of Canadians eat meat, eat vegetables, and milk products, and all of that.
Right.
If he is that, and you are cooking vegan, he must hate your cooking, because vegan is so hard to accept if you eat other stuff.
Well, it's basically he eats what he eats, and the salad that I make him, and I eat my salad. Done. Simple. I am not a complicated eater. I don't eat, a bunch of fake meat or anything. I don't eat those kind of vegan foods. I just eat really simple. Yeah. I've always just eaten simple.
I've been vegetarian for a while now. And it was one night about a year and a half ago, I was at dinner, and my son cooks, and he made this amazing barbecued steak. And for some reason, it must have been some kind of past midlife crisis. If I said midlife, it'd be like, oh my God, you really think you're going to live to be like 120? But I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, that looks so good. I wonder if I could do without it. So I was kind of like this challenge for me, and year and a half in, we're doing okay. Okay, so you can hang out for a little while?
Of course.
By the way, you now have two close friends who have mental health challenges. We're back, Biff. We are so back. Chris Denny, how are you, man? You are. I always start an intro that way, which is kind of weird because it's not like I got to tell you who you are. You're a senior vice president, Lumino Health. That's Sun Life, and Lumino came to our attention because one of the things that I do all the time is talk about how there's a disconnect between people with mental illness and the system that's out there. Forget about the fact that the system, is under-servicing people, that there's not enough to go around. It's just that I kind of think that people need to have somebody hold their hand. At the toughest time in their life, you can't be on your own. I would imagine you agree with that.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of great work done to destigmatize, but still there's a lot of inertia to act, a lot of hurdles for them to do something about their mental health.
So I just want to know, am I interrupting you from playing video games? Because that looks like the kind of thing that video game players use.
I know, it's the only way I can be heard. Must be old technology.
So tell us about Lumino Health. I know it's a free platform for all Canadians. It's available virtually, so it doesn't matter where you are in Canada, and it's available in different languages as well. But what's the most important thing that you think that you guys offer at this point?
Yeah, just think of it as a place for people to connect with healthcare. It brings some transparency and helps them to find the resources that are out there across a whole variety of health areas. But on the mental health side, it can help you find a psychologist. It can help connect you to mental health resources in your area. It's sort of a one-stop shop for you to find what you need to move forward on your health journey.
One of the things that I find is that people, it's sometimes the toughest time in their lives when you suffer from severe mental illness. And I'm speaking about what I know most, and that's depression. So here you are, you have this illness, which has no one path towards a successful treatment, right? Like, Biff was talking about breast cancer before, and there would be a protocol, right? A gold standard that would be the same thing in Toronto as it would be in Saskatoon, as it would be in Vancouver. But with mental health, it seems like there's a million different ways, and people who are crippled by this lethargy that is a symptom of the illness now have to try to navigate their way through a system, and invariably what they'll do is do nothing, right? So how do you help with that?
Well, it's about taking that first step. They don't know where to start and where to find the resources, and the stigma factors in as well. It's that if you're looking for a dentist or physiotherapist, you might ask someone at work or friends or family. Who do you ask? I mean, where do you get that information? We were getting 7,000 searches for psychologists every week, And it was really because people had nowhere else to go to find those resources, and their normal network of friends and family and coworkers, they're a little bit worried because of the stigma to utilize that.
Yeah, it is. It is one of the few areas in life where people will suffer through incredible pain rather than go for help. I mean, it's pretty incredible. I mean, I use this analogy a lot. It could be because my dad was a dentist, but if you had a
So was mine.
Biff, you said what?
My dad was a dentist too.
Really? And now I know that you've done a lot of traveling, right? Like when you were young, was it Minnesota you said, and then Winnipeg, and then, so where did your dad practice?
Well, my father was a public health dentist. So he was, he's a bleeding heart socialist. So he would go into rural areas and basically set up programs for children's teeth.
That's pretty impressive. Now, I don't want to play a trump card on you, but my grandfather, who died when I was very young, was the founder of the Canadian Communist Party. So try to beat that with your socialist background.
I can't beat that.
You know, I gave a speech to CSIS about mental health. And
Wow.
I went in there honestly, and I was just doing it on behalf of the charity, right? So they said, "What can we do for you?" I said, "Look into your computer and see if my grandfather's name is in there." Because all growing up, my whole life, all I heard was Louis Sukloff was his name, and he was one of the founders of the Communist Party. They said, "We can't do that." So,
Michael, was your name in there as well?
My name, well,
are you on their list?
It's if you're related to somebody, right? I mean, especially during the Cold War, I would have been an enemy of the state.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So back to where we were with Biff and I. What did your dad do, Chris?
He worked for the government for an agency called CETA that worked with third world countries and helped them set up irrigation, stuff like that.
So your dad was working in third world countries, setting up irrigation. Biff's dad was doing public medicine. And my dad, oh God, this is going to sound terrible. He was an orthodontist. That's about as far away from public medicine as you can get. But my dad is extremely socially minded and retired like 10 years ago, but it's pretty funny. So Lumino, how do people contact you?
Well, just to go luminohealth.ca. It's actually really easy to use. You just put in your location and what you're looking for, and what you'll see pop up is all the health providers around you. So if you're looking for a psychologist, you'll see all the psychologists around you. A lot of credible information on ratings. We've got 14 million ratings on cost, other information. If you're looking for someone who's open on the weekend or speaks a certain language or provides virtual care, it's all there. And it's just very easy for you to find the one that matches your needs. So it's, as I say, very easy to use, and within minutes you can have someone that to connect with.
So speaking to that person that I was describing in general, who is just feeling like the world has, like there's a foot on his or her head and can't move, even though they want to get help, they just don't know where to start. They don't have the energy to do basically anything for themselves. So the one thing they should do is go to Lumino Health, was it .ca?
Yeah, and actually what's there, Michael, even ahead of looking for a psychologist, there's actually a ton of content there that we work with partners like CAMH and Anxiety Canada. There's a lot of actually free community-based resources that we just bring together. And what we created is what we call the stress and anxiety guide, where it helps you to kind of map out for wherever you are in the journey. If you just want to learn a little bit more, if you want to understand signs and symptoms, if you want to see what kind of treatment plans, if you're dealing with someone who has mental health, it's not you. There are actually resources that are specifically about that. So it helps you to kind of curate and find those resources that are relevant to you, learn a bit more so you have a bit of confidence to act. And then depending on where you want to go with that, we'll give you different resources to connect in with.
How come you're nodding your head when Biff said, sometimes being sort of that, that positive, come on, go get them. You were nodding your head like that when she said, maybe that's not the most useful thing. What resonated with you?
Well, I think, I'm a human being like everybody else. I've had my challenges over time, and to your point, sometimes you're withdrawing from that kind of energy, and you just need I really like the way that Biff talked about it. You just need somebody there with you and just start the conversation. I mean, I think that's for me the biggest thing is taking a first step. It doesn't even matter how small it is, just taking a first step and having somebody with you to do that is like an added plus.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I agree. A long time ago, we started using a phrase called "proud of the shower," and that is when you're at the bottom, you can't just wait to celebrate when you get back to a decent position, because you probably won't get there unless you celebrate little tiny steps that to other people wouldn't mean anything. But if you haven't taken a shower, if you haven't got out of bed in a couple of days and you do it, you gotta take pride in that. And then the next step becomes a little bit easier if you've celebrated your first step. You mentioned your own situation. What have you battled in the past?
So I would have had stretches where really it's sort of intense work stress, if you will, and you think you're dealing with it well mentally, but physically it can catch up to you. And it caused some issues for me, thyroid issues that just sort of jumped up. And it's this idea, it's like you're holding this weight and you hold it long enough, something breaks, and you don't think about it every day. And that's why I worry, actually. One of the things that we saw in the survey that we just did with Canadians is that like 60% of them have had their mental health deteriorate since COVID, but only like 1 in 5 is do anything about it. And I think it's that same inertia to sort of, I can hold it another day, I can hold it another day, versus taking some actions that help you to relieve that pressure, because it builds up over time and then bad things can happen.
We're going to take a call from a Biff Naked in Toronto. Biff, do you have a question for Chris Denny?
Me?
Yeah, I was just thinking it seemed like a bit of a game.
I thought you were taking the call.
No.
Okay. Actually, I do. I'm just, I'm riveted listening to everything. And of course, I'm going to go myself and go explore Lumino Health when we're off of this call, because it's so fascinating. And I think it's providing such an enormous great service for all of us. But yes, I agree. During the pandemic specifically, I noticed just in my friends who are expressing to me, they are feeling their own mental health deteriorate, even from my terribly introverted friends. And I think that people don't realize how those little interactions, just in your daily commute, actually really affect your well-being and your mental well-being. The seeing the same bus driver every day. You don't even have to have a conversation with that person. But it's just those things are not there anymore, or haven't been there, or just those little interactions that we have with other people. Even the regular office, even if you hate your office and complained about your office, it doesn't matter. Having that lack of contact has really, I think, surprised a lot of people. And they realize how isolated they are now feeling. And it's going to start to manifest in unusual ways for them if they don't kind of acknowledge it and maybe seek ways to make themselves feel better. But Lumino Health would be a good way.
We see people kind of almost on two extremes. To your point, the isolation, it is something that's sort of wearing away at people. And then you have families with young kids, and they've got there's people in their face all the time, and they got no break, and they feel like they're failing at all aspects of their life. So I really worry that the longer this goes on, this is a growing crisis. We would have thought of it as a crisis before COVID, to be honest. You see more mental health issues in society, and I think this is a ticking time bomb. So I think it's important that people kind of get out ahead of it and don't wait till things break. Start little actions that get you on the right path.
Yeah, I'm afraid of what, let's hope that we find out sometime in the not too distant future what life after the pandemic is going to be like. Like, hey, Chris, shut your dog up, okay? I hear that dog barking, okay? It's not my dog. Okay, it's my dog. you know, we're going to find out what life is like afterwards. And I'm just afraid that we're going to see such an increase in, well, we've already seen a huge increase in suicides, right? I was reading from somebody in Saskatchewan. I don't remember what his or her position was, but they were saying how, you know, the number of suicide attempts, calls that they have gone to, so I guess it was paramedics, have like increased hugely during this. So I'm just worried about what the world is going to look like afterwards and what the damage is going to be. Kind of like a tornado blows through, and while the tornado's going through, all you can think of is, God, I hope I survive this. But then when it leaves, you look around and you go, it's devastation.
It's like post-traumatic stress disorder, but on a global scale, because everybody's feeling a lot of the same emotions, and it's building.
So this was great. Thank you so much to both of you. Lovely cheeriness to today's conversation, which makes it, I think, very usable for people. And I just love chatting with you both. Thanks, Biff.
Thank you. I loved chatting with you both too.
So you need to we need to keep in touch. It's been a long time since we spoke, and I think I'm not smarter now than I was before, because you can't increase your intelligence, but I feel like I understand the world a tiny bit better now than I did 40 minutes ago. So thanks for that.
And thank you for that.
Okay. And Chris, thank you so much for coming and sharing something that could be life-changing for people. And you just never know what little thing might turn somebody's life around. And one thing's for sure, when you're lying in bed and you think your life is over, that there's nothing beyond this, that no one can help you, and you feel totally lost, just one little step can be the biggest thing that you ever do. And maybe luminohealth.ca is that step.
We hope so.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, guys. Do you know Sean Cullen, Biff? Sean Cullen, just say yes.
Yes, I do.
Yes, comedian, singer.
Yes.
He's done a song for us every day. And he's an awesome talent. And so he said, it's summertime, right? So he recorded a couple of sort of classic summertime hits for us in his usual way. This is going to be our last show we're going to go on a brief hiatus, not sure how long. I'm a little bit burned out from this. And also, we need to sort of collect ourselves. We're going to do a show next week, which hopefully will be the biggest thing that we've ever done, and then take off a tiny bit of time and hopefully find some new sponsors. But we've had one that's been amazing, and that's Janssen. Janssen is pharmaceutical arm of Johnson & Johnson. And, I'm not shilling for the pharmaceutical industry in any way. They came to us and said, we want to give you money. Don't mention us. Don't talk about us. Just use it well. And that allowed us to do this show and allows us to do stuff in the future. So I just need a tiny little bit of a break, and then we're back at it. So thanks.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
So that's the plan now for Sick Not Week for Isolation Nation. We're going to release stuff every day because we now have 60 shows to draw from. That's like 120 guests. And if you look at the total amount of time from 60 shows, it's like 40 hours. So I'm going to suggest that you watch all 40 hours consecutively. If you're not mentally ill beforehand, you will be afterwards. It's just, this is a great experience. So we'll see you next week on this. Watch out for our material. Make sure you retweet it and make sure the word gets out. And let's start with Sean Cullen's. Roll it.
It'll be sad, but yes, I know we'll say goodbye for the summer. I will tell you this, I'll send you all my love every day in a letter sealed with a kiss.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just love Sean Cullen. I'm sorry to all the people that that Michael, you love him. I love Sean Cullen. Okay,
I love Sean too.
Oh my gosh. Okay, guys. Well, let's enjoy this together. Feel free to sing along. Probably more chance that Biff will do that. But I shouldn't underestimate your singing ability. This is, well, we all know these songs. This is Kokomo. Roll it, Phil.
Michael, have you thought about where you're going to take your holidays? Aruba, Jamaica, come on out and take you to Bermuda, Bahamas, come on pretty mama, Key Largo, Montego, baby, that'll we go down to Kokomo, moving fast and then we'll take it slow, that's where I wanna go, straight down to Kokomo. Kokomo would be nice.
Yeah, that's it's pretty adorable. I Case, you were smiling because it's just awesome.
It's so random.
It's so random too that we're doing this. But I always looked at it this way with mental health, that what we at our charity Sick Not Weak believe is that if you just give people the straight, stoic, somber mental health talk, then they're going to tune it out. So let's keep her going now. What's the time of year? It's okay. Roll it.
I think Mungo Jerry said it best. Well, in the summertime, where the weather is high, you can reach right out and touch the sky. It's the summertime. You got women on your mind. Have a drink, have a drive, go out and see what you can find. Don't drink and drive.
Yeah.
Of course.
By the way, his reference in the first one, where are you going to go on your vacation? Any suggestions as to where at this time in the planet Earth we could go for a vacation? There is no vacation here, and there's no place to go anyway. Thanks, John, and thanks to you guys, and loved it. We'll see you soon. Don't forget luminohealth.ca, and don't forget Biff Naked. Your book was called Bifficus, right?
Bifficus, yes.
Right. And you wrote that by hand, is that correct?
Initially I did, and then I got it together.
Well, it came out great. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.